What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Take It Slow here, aka Angry Porto, aka Clancy, aka too many goddamn nicknames. And I am here with you today to talk about apparently one of my favorite games. I didn't even realize it was one of my favorite games until I played it for the third time a couple weeks ago. And that is Mafia 3. So Mafia 3 is a third-person, open-world cover shooter with fairly decent stealth and combat mechanics. So, Mafia 3 is set in 1968 in New Bordeaux, which is a fictional New Orleans. And it follows the story of Lincoln Clay. Lincoln Clay is a black special forces veteran returning home from Vietnam. And at first it's just to say goodbye to various members of the black mob working out of New Bordeaux. The black mob is kind of Lincoln Clay's adoptive family. You know, Lincoln was an orphan, and once he sort of became of age, he was taken under the wing of Sammy, who's the leader of the black mob at the start of the game. And from there, one thing leads to another, things escalate, and that's where the game sort of kicks off. I'm not going to get into story spoilers, but that's just sort of the backdrop of Mafia 3. So I want to talk about what Mafia 3 does very well. And right off the bat, one of Mafia 3's strong suits is just the combat in general. The cover system in particular is particularly fluid and rewarding. Also, the gunplay is very satisfying, at least for me. It's very visceral. The audio files of the guns in particular are very rewarding. So there's also what is called brutal takedowns, which are essentially finisher moves typically activated in melee combat either by countering an enemy's melee attack or charging up your own melee attack. They are their namesake. They are brutal takedowns. A lot of them will make you say, "Oh shit." So part of the combat gameplay that is so appealing of Mafia 3 is its stealth gameplay. You can clear most rackets without getting caught if you're good enough. Lincoln also has certain ways to sneak up on people either by whistling or with his Vietnam vision, which is basically a wall hack. The stealth takedowns are very similar to the brutal takedowns, albeit they're quiet so they won't alert everyone else, but they're equally as brutal. Oh, and going back to brutal takedowns real quick, if you perform a brutal takedown in the middle of combat or at the beginning of combat, anyone nearby will get stunned, essentially. They'll kind of like fall backwards and be like, "Oh!" And it'll allow you to perform a brutal takedown on them, so you can kind of chain these together in a sort of hilarious display of brutal violence. The combat and stealth gameplay overall actually feels more like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry than it does Grand Theft Auto, which is great because Grand Theft Auto is great, but its combat is always a little, I don't want to say lackluster, but its combat and gunplay is not what holds the franchise up, whereas I think Mafia 3 did a great job of really making the combat and stealth gameplay the sort of the pillar of this game, and it really shows. So there are different types of enemies employed either by the Mafia or the Dixie Mafia or even the Haitians at the beginning of the game. You have the shotgunners, which kind of just walk towards you, almost kamikaze-like with a shotgun. There are sentries, fast dudes that once they take any damage, they'll sprint towards a phone and call back reinforcements. There's your rifleman, which is a sniper from the back, and then there are just general thugs that have various weapons. So the diversity of enemies is okay and realistic to a sense. After all, there aren't really classes in the real world, and Mafia 3 tries its hardest, in my opinion, to be as realistic as it can be for a game. All the same, I think some tougher or more dynamic enemies could have been employed, given how powerful Lincoln is, but hindsight 2020, what are you going to do? Another aspect of this game that I enjoyed quite a bit was the driving. Although I will say it changed as the patches and DLCs were released. In the base game, the cars feel a little bit like boats, and you can even turn on simulation driving, which makes it even harder to drive. With the introduction of slow-mo driving, after the Faster Baby DLC was added, it really allows you to do some gnarly drifting. The muscle cars feel powerful. There's plenty of burning out to be done. If you're looking for that classic 60s, 70s muscle car drifting down the streets vibe, this game has plenty of it. So without getting into any spoilers, the story of Mafia 3 is also one of its highlights. It touches on a lot of really powerful themes. Of course, there's racism. You know, Hangar 13 was pretty vocal at the beginning, saying that they would accurately portray racism in the South in the 60s, and I really appreciated that. The main characters, in my opinion, are all very interesting and well-voiced. You don't have any boring characters. There's no cliches. There's no caricatures. There's solid writing all around. And even some of the villains, you know, their motivation, especially the Marcanos, I wouldn't say I'm sympathetic towards them, but they're humanized very well. Their motivations are very understandable, touched to a point where, you know, I hate them, but I get why they're doing what they're doing. And that is the sign of good writing. So every racket you conquer leads to a new cinematic cutscene, which are all pretty high quality in terms of their actual graphical fidelity. Their acting, their writing, and the story, again, is very compelling. I think there probably are some playlists on YouTube that just go from each cutscene one to another. And if you were to follow that, yeah, it's a well-written story. It's good stuff. So this game's soundtrack is also something I want to talk about because it mixes 70s rock, folk, and funk. And it's one of those things where you find yourself driving around doing your slow-mo drifting with Creedence Clearwater Revival, I hear a band in the background, and it just feels right. It feels thematically appropriate, and it's a blast. The game's score itself is also something that should be noted. Mafia 3's score, in my opinion, is excellent. It's I don't even know how to really describe it. It's like a 60s, 70s detective theme that amps up when combat's going, but also like has a good layer of suspense when you're still in stealth. Alright, so I want to talk about some of the things that I think Mafia 3 could have done better. Unfortunately, there's a decent amount of them, which is partly why Mafia 3 didn't quite get the praise it could have. So right off the bat, there's only one save file, which gets erased every time you play if you want to start a new game. Come on, man. Like, this game came out in 2016. There's no excuse to not have multiple save files. I'm not sure why the reason for that was, but we should have at least 3. And if not 10, if not numerous. I mean, the amount of storage space modern systems have, there's no excuse to not have multiple save files. Again, I'm sure there was a reason for it, but having one save file also puts your save file at risk of corruption. I will say the checkpoints in this game were pretty good and reliable. And yeah, not having to ever save, gets rid of that concern for the player, but all the same, we need more save files are better. So another big criticism of this game is the world, unfortunately, feels rather empty. And that's not to say it's not designed well. I thought all the various districts were designed well. There was a lot of buildings you can run into, which is useful if you're running from the cops or just it. The design is solid, but it feels empty. A lot of people are just standing around for the most part. Some of them are having fairly interesting conversations, but they become repetitive the longer you play. You'll end up hearing the same sort of goofy saying over and over again. And admittedly, that's just something that you'll run into playing an open world game filled with lots of nameless NPCs, but it was particularly egregious in Mafia 3. Also, you can, if you're in a hostile district, you can murder 30 thugs in a building and walk 10 feet outside, and no one has any idea what's going on. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what's happening between Lincoln and hostile NPCs versus the rest of the civilian population. Also, in Mafia 2, you could get pulled over for traffic violations, like running a red light or speeding. And this is one of the things I was looking forward to in Mafia 3, especially, again, given the racial theme that is present. And I was like, oh, Lincoln's black. He's going to get pulled over more. He's going to get harassed by cops more. And granted, if you walk up to a cop in Mafia 3, they'll kind of harass you, no doubt. But they won't give a shit if you're running red lights, if you're crashing into street lights, running through stop signs. That was something I was looking forward to. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the game advertised itself on accurately portraying police bias in the 60s. But unless you literally run into a cop or start killing them, they really just don't care. Now, I could see the argument that if the cops were behaving realistically, it could drag the story down, and it could drag the gameplay down as well, because you wouldn't have the ability to do those really cool drifting around corners and stuff, because you'd get pulled over every time. But I think having some sort of toggle option in like the gameplay options menu to have cops behave realistically or not would have been an easy fix for this. Although easy, I don't know how hard that would have been to code, but just spitballing here as to a possible solution. So this game also lacks good side missions. Most of the side missions in this game are just fetch quests sending you down to the bayou, stealing various trucks or boats or what have you. Which, again, I love the soundtrack of this game. I love the driving in this game, especially with the slow-mo. So doing those sort of fetch missions where you're just spending a lot of time driving through the world with the really cool soundtrack playing in the background, for me that was fine, but admittedly the side missions were sparse. Also, there are some side missions where you're interacting with various underbosses for the 3 overbosses that you have, Vito, Cassandra, and Burke. And they actually tell some fairly interesting stories, but it's just Lincoln and that underboss looking straight at each other, talking. Can't skip through it. So it's a bit of a, I don't know what to call it. It looks kind of like laziness to me. There's also a lack of replayability in general. Once you clear a racket, it's cleared for good. There's never a risk of it being attacked by the Mafia and being retaken and then you having to take it back or anything like that. And once you finish the game, it's over. There's no ability to replay rackets. I think adding this ability, sort of like they've done, I believe, Far Cry 4 and then Far Cry 5, just adding the ability to be able to replay rackets would solve this. It would be awesome. I mean, I'm going to be recording gameplay for this review, and I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be because I can't replay any of the rackets. And speaking of the rackets too, they're fairly well designed and unique, especially given that each district is also unique. So yeah, it would have been fun to be able to just go back and try and clear rackets in different ways. Lincoln himself is also a bit overpowered. Admittedly, he's a 6'3", 240-pound special ops veteran, so there's not a lot of people that can stand in his way, no doubt. But I think you could have incorporated that without completely nerfing. Mostly civilians is what I'm talking about. The Mafia henchmen can give you a run for your money, especially if you get overwhelmed. But the civilians in this game are a complete joke. Lincoln will one-shot every one of them without even a fight. You know, you can walk into a bar with 30 civilians and Lincoln will just start one-shotting all of them. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want complete realism, because it doesn't matter how tough you are. You walk into a bar and you fight 30 people, you're going to lose. But it would have been interesting if the civilians were able to fight back a little bit more, even in the same way as Mafia 2 or some of the other Grand Theft Auto games. You know, you can beat up civilians, but they'll defend themselves. Granted, you can scale the game up to hard, and it makes the henchmen a little stronger, but I think there needed to be a little bit more time put into the AI of civilians. And speaking of the AI in general, it's not great. A lot of the henchmen will sort of just walk toward Lincoln in open view. I'm talking about the shotgunners. The general henchmen will take cover, and they will occasionally try to flank, but the AI could use some work. The sentries as well. The sentries should, as soon as they spot Lincoln, they should be sprinting to get the phone. The sentries, I believe, are actually also the weakest unit, so they don't sprint for the phone until they take damage, and they don't take a lot of damage to be taken down. So I haven't played this game too much on the highest difficulty, so I'm curious if that's one of the changes. So if it is, let me know, and I'll speak to that. But my general sense is that the AI is okay at best. Also, non-vision, which I mentioned earlier, which is essentially just a wall hack. It's not addressed at all why Lincoln can do it, and you don't even need it to play the game. And all it does, again, is just add to Lincoln's overpoweredness? Is that a word? I don't know if that's a word. That's a word now. Yeah, I mean, Lincoln is already one-shotting civilians. He's already, doing brutal takedowns on people, popping adrenaline shots. So he doesn't need a wall hack. There's also no real boss fights to speak of. When lieutenants spawn, they come with more baddies, but they spawn in the same racket that you'd already cleared out before. And there's nothing dynamic about the lieutenants or fighting them at all. Just more of the same stealth cover gameplay. Which, again, for me works, but it would have been interesting if, Joey Diaz is a funny character in this game. I don't know if funny is the right word, but Joey Diaz is a character in this game. It would have been funny if fighting, what's his name? I think it's Barbarino? Whatever. But it would have been funny if he did something special that no one else does, but all he does is sort of hop out of his truck, say something funny, and then you just kill him like everyone else. So, this is sort of a criticism of the writing. On more than one occasion, in the cinematics, people just walk right up to Lincoln, holding a gun, and he disarms them immediately. And it's not to say that a guy like Lincoln wouldn't be able to disarm someone pointing a gun at them, but you only get to use that once, in my opinion, and I believe that happened at least twice. Someone walks up to Lincoln talking shit, and he just hits them, takes the gun, and a hyper dangerous situation is immediately diffused because writing. On a similar note, once in the DLC and once in the regular game, Lincoln is tied up, is confined, and he gets out of it by breaking out of it because he can break out of it. And there are ways to confine someone and then have them break out without just having them break out. You could do better than that. Okay, so that's sort of everything for the base game. I want to talk about the DLC really quick and the The reason it's going to be really quick is because there's actually not a lot of content in the DLC. I would say for each DLC, you're looking at maybe 3 to 5 hours each. Faster Baby takes you to Sinclair Parish, which is kind of a rich town outside of New Bordeaux with an extremely authoritarian, abusive, racist sheriff running the town. And it deals with you interacting with that person and yada yada. I'm not gonna, no story spoilers, but all the content for the DLC, in my opinion, is very good. However, I was finished with it, I think, the night I started it, and couldn't help but feel a little cheated, especially because the DLC, I believe, is going for $10 on Steam base. So again, for someone who's actually a big fan of the gameplay, it was worth it for me, but it's really hard to justify that price for 3 hours. With Faster Baby, however, you can then start your own weed growing operation, which is pretty useful for the rest of the game because it's another source of income. So if you do get Faster Baby, I would recommend doing it closer to the beginning, just so you can reap your rewards. Literally. You also have Stones Unturned, which introduces a villain from Donovan's past. John Donovan is one of Lincoln's former commanding officers in Vietnam, super related to the main story. A villain comes back from his past and you deal with him. Yeah, again, Stones Unturned. It was a fun mission chain that I went through, but again, over within 3 hours. Asking price on Steam, $10 again. Excuse me, $15, and I need to fact check myself a little bit again. Faster Baby is also $15, so that's even more expensive than I think it's worth. Again, you're getting 3, maybe 5 hours out of it. The last DLC that came out is Sign of the Times, which has you dealing with a sort of death cult that's emerging in New Bordeaux. I thought Sign of the Times was actually the most interesting of the 3 DLC. It puts Lincoln in more of like a detective role, and it actually, I believe, is the longest of the DLCs added, and it's going for only $10 on Steam. So ironically, if you're looking to fill out your fix a little bit more of Mafia 3, I would go with Sign of the Times, see if you like that, and then maybe jump into the other ones, especially if they went on sale, because yeah, Sign of the Times is going for $10. Again, 3 to 5 hours of gameplay. I think $10 is a little too much to ask for, but cheaper than the other two, and it's fun DLC. So ultimately, Mafia 3 is, I think it's a good game, and it slipped under the radar because it was either released too soon, or it was rushed, or there was some, I don't know what the development was behind the game. And to be fair, to put the game in context, it's looking pretty good now, but the launch version of the game was pretty bug-ridden. I believe it was locked at 30 FPS. There was no character customization, which they added in later. The game just lacked polish on release, and admittedly, a lot of the gameplay and a lot of the very interesting story is sort of tied behind a lot of grindy combat, which for me was fine. I love the combat in this game, but I understand the critique that too much of the good story took too long to get to. You had to grind through these districts doing more or less the same shit, killing henchmen, burning shit, yada yada. It's a solid game. It's nothing game changing, but if you enjoy the stealth combat driving mechanics and don't mind a bit of grind, it's sort of an historical 1960s GTA clone. Alright, so I guess we're at the most important point of the review, which is, would you rebuy? So right now, the base game on Steam is for $30, the deluxe is for $60. The deluxe edition also including some kickback pre-order content, collectible New Bordeaux map, the season pass, which includes all of the DLC for $30. If you were to buy the DLC separately, you're looking at 2 15s and 1 10, so it would be $40 if you were to buy all the DLC separately. So if you are looking to do a full purchase of the game, the digital deluxe is the way you want to go. As for, do I think those prices are reasonable? I mean, it always depends on how you value your money. I mean, I always think that video games are an excellent investment. I mean, you're getting the base game of Mafia 3 is probably a good 20, 30 hours. So $30 for 20 to 30 hours of content is, I mean, you go to a movie, you spend what, $30 for 2 hours. So I always find it hard to be too critical of the price of games. But if we're looking at Mafia 3, if we're looking at that $30 price point, in context to what other games you can get for that, I don't think the $30 for the season pass is something, or for $60 for the digital deluxe edition, I don't think that's worth it unless you start playing the main game and you're having a blast. Then those extra DLC will give you a nice little extra fix. So I think that $30 price point is very reasonable, and then of course if it goes on sale, then at that point, you know, I think any sale would make this game an even more enticing buy. Especially, again, it's going to be up to, do you like open world games? Do you like GTA clones? Do you like guns, Do you like guns, cars, and stuff? So if the answer to any of those or all of those are yes, then this is a solid game for you. And for me personally, would rebuy. I bought it full price, so I bought it at $60 plus $30 season pass. So I spent $90 for it. I played this game 3 times at this point, and I think, what is that? That's 130 hours now. So for me, worth. For you, think about how you value your money, and if you're a fan of GTA and you see this thing go on sale, pick it up for sure. Alright, that's going to do it for me, folks. This is Take It Slow, Angry Porto, Clancy, too many goddamn nicknames. Signing off. Thanks for listening. Love you all. Well, not all of you. But most of you. I love most of you.
Take it slow.